Welcome to The Happy Nurse, the podcast that encourages nurses to offer themselves the same compassion that they so freely give to others. I am Elena, a registered nurse on a mission to reduce burnout in nursing. Let's jump in. Hi, nursing colleagues. I'm just going to interrupt quickly just to share with you some details about my new group coaching experience. It's for those of you who are feeling worn out or just ready for something more, really. I know how tough it can be. I've been there, and that's why I have created the Blossom group coaching experience. This experience over 15 weeks will help you to reconnect with your purpose. You'll build practical tools to manage your stress and connect with a community of other nurses that truly get you and understand the journey that you're on. If you want to feel energized, confident, and back in control, check out Blossom. Enrollments are now open. We kick off on the 15th of September, and there's a $250 discount with the code Wellbeing if you register soon. Head to elena.com.au/blossom to find out more. Hopefully, see some of you in there. Back to the episode. Hi everyone, I'm back again. It's Elena. Here comes the second episode for this new season. Today I am joined by Todd Angelucci. Have I said that right, Todd?
You did. It's either Angelucci. My dad says Angelucci, the Italians, and my dad's Italian, but it's Angelucci, right?
Angelucci. Sorry, I didn't even think to ask you before we
That's all
started.
good.
So I discovered Todd on LinkedIn. He has been very vocal recently, advocating for nurses in that space. And I reached out because I thought he would be an amazing guest to have on the podcast, and I wanted to let you all know about him. So Todd is a transformational habit finder, a coach, a mentor for men, and an advocate for authentic leadership. He has been an army medic, an ICU nurse, a corporate leader, and now is a transformational coach. Todd has walked the path from burnout to breakthrough. A brain tumor became his wake-up call, not a setback, but a catalyst. Instead of asking, why me? He asked, what are you trying to teach me? That mindset shift fuels everything Todd does today. He helps men and women uncover unconscious thinking patterns, break cycles of self-sabotage, and lead with clarity, confidence, and emotional integrity. Using science-backed tools and decades of frontline experience, he guides clients to lead from the inside out, where the real change begins. Todd is especially passionate about helping men reconnect to their true identity in a world that rewards performance but punishes vulnerability. His work bridges masculine and feminine energies, creating space for healing, restored polarity, and authentic connection in leadership, relationships, and life. Through his coaching, men's groups, and mentorship, Todd helps people drop the mask, reclaim their voice, and live on purpose. He's not just a coach, he's a guide for those ready to lead with truth and live with peace. I love that last bit. I love it all, but I love that last statement.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Lead with truth and live with peace. I think that's a real signpost for life that you've got there in your bio, Todd.
It is. I think people search for happiness, but really we want some peace, right?
That is so true. And that kind of encapsulates what it was that drew me to reach out to you in the first place when I read your article you published on LinkedIn a few months ago about reconnecting to the spiritual side of nursing.
Yeah. It's interesting because you don't often hear people talking about it. And I wrote this article, and it's founded on a lot of principles, but I've had multiple interesting life journeys for myself, brain tumor being one, and if anybody could relate, I always say I was raised by wolves. My parents had a lot of challenges, yet they did the best they could. But when there was some addiction, some things that I struggled with early on, and I made some real interesting changes. And the thing that I found is, and I think nursing needs to kind of look at this a little more, is like there needs to be a recovery, kind of a recovery process for nurses. And a spiritual connection. Like, we're not talking about it, and we see so much crazy stuff that, like, average humans don't see. And to think, like, there was times I would do codes in the ICU and people were dead, and I'd look up like, "Hey, are they in the room?" Like, if are you like, and people are facing their most challenging moments and even death. I did hospice I've done so much in nursing and healthcare and business. Like, to not to sit and to kinda not talk about it. I think nurses do, connect spiritually, but we just don't talk about it. Like, I don't know if you've been in the floor, you worked with anyone, you're like, "Hey, man, you talking about God?" Or, like, "What's going on?" Like, do you, connect with a power, Christian, whatever you may be, do we have these conversations? I don't remember talking to people about that.
No, I don't either, but I think, like you say, it is there, it's just unsaid. I remember back when I was doing my nurse training back in Aberdeen in Scotland, and we worked in these big old Nightingale wards. Like, these hospitals were built 1900s, Victorian times. And I remember doing it was a night shift, and we were doing last offices, and suddenly the nurse went and opened the window, and I'm like, "What are you doing?" And she said, "I'm letting the soul go out." And I was like, "Oh, okay, no worries." Like, I was only like 18 at the time and hadn't even given it a second thought, apart from the fact, like, I was quite confronted because it was the first time I'd seen a dead body. And I just thought, "Oh, that was such a beautiful, touching thing to do for that patient." Even though they had left, um, their body, this nurse was still honoring them and allowing their spirit to go out because that's what she believed was what we should do.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Like, I used to think that. I'm like, "Man, where are these people?" Like, and I struggled with for a long time, with the kind of a spiritual connection, and I found, there's a difference between religion and kinda connection, you know what I mean? Like, and I I value both in certain ways for sure, but the thing that I've learned, and I'm speaking from the States, you're over in Australia, you're Scottish, right? And like, things may be a little different, but at the same time, um nursing has not changed in years, and they're still kinda yelling or from in the same echo chambers and from the same mountaintops. And so, I guess what I share and I write about is like, okay, I see that, and I understand that there needs to be change, but, and I talk about this inside out leadership, this inside we're all leaders, like, whether, nursing, because I've been in corporate world, I've done a lot of things outside of nursing and come back, and I don't think nurses are really taught how to lead. One, they're taught how to manage. Like, that's what we're doing. We're just managing. Like, how good are we at managing? But
Yeah.
we're managing patients, we're managing, but leading and connecting with people and connecting to ourselves and to something bigger than us helps us to kind of look past these wounds. Let's be honest, we're wounded. Like, why did we get into a helping profession, right? Like, are we like paid codependents? Like, I'll say, you know what I mean? Like, let's think about that. And they in the States, and I don't know about in other parts of the country, you talk about AA and Al-Anon and codependent anonymous. Like, there's recovery programs for this, right? So what makes you think, and a lot of the basis of 12-step groups, I actually wrote an article like nursing needs its own recovery program, like a 12-step program, So
Oh, yeah, that resonates with me. Definitely. Definitely. Because I think, you know, I know you do some work around archetypes, Todd, and I'm doing my postgrad in psychology at the moment, and it fascinates me. And I've always been fascinated by Carl Jung's work and the archetypes. And I've thought for a long time, but I've never really said it publicly that, there's a lot of wounded healers, that archetype in nursing, because I identify as one myself,
mm,
and I can see it in others too. But like you said, it's because of what we're exposed to. It's maybe what attracted us into the profession in the first place. We could go down a huge rabbit hole with that one too. But we need some kind of, recovery program is a good way of looking at it. I like that. On how to manage our nervous system regulation and the the trauma we're witnessing, the moral injury, the compassion fatigue, the burnout that's always teetering there in the background. It's a full on profession, and we're exposed to so much that a lot of other professions aren't. And it does impact our mental health.
it does. And to say it doesn't, and I think what happens, and I've written a bunch of articles on this on LinkedIn, and I encourage people, I'd have a conversation, and not that like I'm this like expert, right? Like I have a lot of experience, and there's a lot of stuff that I read about. And I use this term soul tired, and like, it masks itself as apathy, as appearing lazy, as just soul tired. Like, it's so hard to do, and you just there and it's resembles a lot of symptoms of what we call burnout. I'm almost burned out from hearing burnout. You know what I mean? Now we've put in fancy words to the trauma-informed care or trauma-informed, like, what putting words to gives us a shortcut to just explain it rather than for us to embody inside of ourselves the ability to just see what's there, give space to it, and start to walk through some of these things and just be open about it. And nurses harm each other, like, I don't know if you have that there. They're like, nurses eat their young, and there's just a lot of different things that show up, and there's a way to handle it that I teach a lot of people, and it's really starting to embrace yourself, like, warts and all, um, not like, "Hey, I gotta look perfect or be perfect," but, like, when you could start embracing your pain in here, seeing it, you could see it in others, and you could walk alongside them.
I love that soul tired. I'm going to circle back to that. And
Mm,
like you, I think burnout has started to be, it's overused. I know I've been using it for years now, but since the pandemic, they're saying, what is it, 40, 60% of us are burnt out. But I think that soul tired, does that almost encompass burnout, moral injury, compassion fatigue? Like, listening to what you were saying, that was kind of the picture I was getting in my mind. Would
mhm,
that
yeah,
encompass the whole lot, do you think?
I do, I do, and I call it's funny, I was working with a client, and it happened to not be a nurse, actually. I was working with somebody one-on-one, and he was really stepping into some really awesome spaces, and I use this term, and we kind of worked it through together because I talk about the soul tiredness, like, normal humans get this, like, if they've been abused and all that, right? And when you take those hits, I had a nurse call me. She reached out to me on LinkedIn, and she was struggling, and I said, let's just, take this assessment. I have an assessment I use that's really great. It starts to unlock some things for people. And we got on the call. I went and she just needed space. And she's like, I'm working at this facility and I'm doing the best I can. And she's from another country. And she goes in there, everyone seems against me and this manager. And she like just started to cry. And I was just like,
Mm.
I'm like, and because it's her job and she's trying to do the best she can. And we're friends to this day. She's pretty awesome. She went through one of my courses and I said, it's okay. Like, and I just let her cry. Like, it's okay. I just gave her the space. And I think we don't give ourselves the space. And if we can't give ourselves the space, we can't give another a space. And so we're always either trying to fix them or help them. Like, here we go, the help, but the help is fixing. And sometimes the fixing isn't the answer, it's just allowing. And so I said, what would it be like for you not to take all this that's coming in here from these people or this situation and not let it hit you in the soul? And
Wow.
for a moment she saw it and she goes, "Why am I doing this?" And I said, "You don't have to take these soul shots." They're like, I call them soul shots, almost like punches, like they're just hits. And we're allowing it, like, subconsciously, and we don't even aware, and she goes, "You're right." And I said, "What would it be like to learn a way that you could see your own pain, but that person or that thing or that situation is its own thing? What pain are they going to?" When you could start to see things this way, it doesn't hit you as hard, or you start to work through it in a different way. So it was really powerful, and they said, "I could teach you that in literally a session, we could walk through some of this." So, you know, I'm really passionate about this because I took soul shots for a long time.
Soul shots. I like that. That's powerful. And it's all these different hits that we take, like you're talking about. And I love that reframe you used with your client about thinking about what the other person is going through to make them behave in that way. And I remember when I met my partner, we were having a discussion and I said to him, I said, "You've got to remember at the end of the day, we're all walking bags of trauma." And he just went, "Wow, Elena, I've never thought of it like that before." But, we take all these soul shots and it all impacts us. So we're all walking around with this trauma inside us. And circling back to what you were talking about earlier about nurses eating their young, yes, that happens here in Australia. I witnessed it. In fact, I was subjected to it back in Scotland. I think it's an international phenomenon. I have recorded podcasts about it in the past, in the early days of the pod. But I think it's we're all carrying all these wounds and then we don't realize it. We're not dealing with them. And then we're projecting them out onto others that we actually do care about. And we don't realize we're doing it. It's a subconscious thing.
Yeah, and it's starting to step into it, not from a place uh, you know, of shame, like that this stuff starts to trigger what we call like a lot of shame stuff. I work with
Mhm.
guys and more women actually, because of course the guys in their lives are the problem, right? And the guys are the problem in many ways, I'll be honest. But women and how they work with this in their own lives is really fun to watch. And the playground of like this stuff shows up in the playgrounds of our life. Like everything's a reflection and projection of what's going on in here.
Yes, definitely. And I think we're also susceptible to that subliminal messaging that comes from the media. And I think that writes a lot of our internal narratives at times as well that we don't realize is happening and it's playing out in the background.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, and our need to connect with others, even negatively, like, hey, we're all in this together, and I think we need more nurses to be there for themselves and for each other. I'm a ex-military guy, and it's having each other's back. It's helping each other through the challenging time, and it's being able just to communicate in a way that allows people's walls of resistance to drop so that the real connection can take place rather than, you know, some of the issues. And I do some bedside stuff now. I've gotten back to it, just, my brain tumor, I want to get back. I think nurses still love nursing, and there's a way to go back to it or embrace it in a way that's truly meaningful and from the heart, that you don't really allow as much of those soul shots and that stuff to hit you. Granted, we still have challenging assignments. We still have, healthcare is a shambles. It's not going to change, and so w- anytime soon. I'm not going to say it's not going to change, but like, how do you like the latest thing I've been focused on is like how to help people reapproach a field that's basically wounded them.
It's it is interesting because like you said, it's not going to change anytime soon. And I think it's been recognized globally with the nursing shortage that the systems are broken and they've pushed us to our limits. But like you said, it's that inside out transformation that we need. And I think nurses can do the work themselves to start to change the culture within the broken system. And like you said, we can have each other's backs. We can be aware of what's going on internally for us. And that alone could make a big impact because once you start empowering nurses to realize that they have some control and give them that leadership ability, they may start to find their voice and not be as afraid to speak up. I mean, I still do bedside as well. I work I'm peri-op, so I work in theatre, I do scrub scout, and I do a bit of PACU as well. And I love going into work. I only do like point 0.5 now. But because I've done all this internal work, and I'm not professing to be some kind of amazing person, I'm not at all. But like you said, I don't take those soul shots anymore. Like working in theatre can be challenging at times because stress can get high. But I've learned not to take anything that happens in that operating room personally. I just let it all go over my head, and I don't absorb those shots like I once would have because I used to.
Yeah, me too. And it's okay if a couple shots get in, right? And like, hey, wow, that taught me something. Whoa, man, my
Mhm.
nervous system got jacked up. And there's a lot of things that show up, and I think circling back to archetypes, it gives us a nice framework and puts to words some of the things that we could look at in ourselves and start to see it and embrace it and not necessarily run away from it.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always good to have that external kind of vision or framework um to help yourself, yeah, understand what's going on for you. I mean, I love this kind of stuff because it's my jam. I'm studying psychology. Everybody knows that 'cause I speak about it so much. But to some people, it's really confronting because, like you said, we can go into that shame spiral, and that's never a good place to be. So, if there's a framework there to identify what's going on and why it's happening, you can start to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? You can start to embrace why you are the way you are. Does that make sense?
It does. It gives you some context and some a place of reference. Like, like I start to learn what gets my nervous system kind of triggered and jacked up. I've seen it and
Yeah.
I've breathed into it. And I think what the challenge is that we're so afraid of it, or we're judging it, or we're trying to fix it or squash it away or tuck it in here, right? Tuck it in your shorts a little bit, like, right? There's some meme that says, "Hey, your crazy's is coming out. It's not tucked in, right?" Hey, you know? But what if you, like, started to just play around with it being there and not and breathing into it, and because the more that we start to push it away and start to try to squash it, it just gets stronger and it just causes more challenges rather than like, hey, and if you ever like, let's get back to recovery, right? Isn't there like if we're going on the premises of recovery in 12 step, isn't there like an amends, right? Like we're humans. We make mistakes, right? What would it be like to say, "Hey, I'm sorry," like my crazy got untucked there for a minute, or I went a little sideways here, like, Jesus Lord, I was triggered up, and even being a leader in that space, like, I think, leaders need to create standards and be a leader and demonstrate, like, "Hey, I made a mistake. Like, can we talk about this?" Rather than this kinda sideways stuff that comes out, you know?
Yeah, that's the power of vulnerability, isn't it? I I try to embrace it as much as I can, and I practiced originally with my kids because obviously being a parent, you don't get it right all the time, and my nervous system can get triggered by them, and they were kind of my practice ground for being vulnerable because 'cause I'd go to them afterwards and be like, "Hey, buddy, I'm sorry, mum overreacted to that. I shouldn't have, um, said what I did or, responded to you the way that I did." And that gave me the confidence to then take it into the workplace. I was leading a team, just being honest, transparent. And if I did make a mistake or, if I did get triggered, I'd be like, "Hey, I'm really sorry."
I've done that too with my kids, and, so I call her my daughter, she's basically my stepdaughter, and I've raised her, and, there's times that I've gone sideways on her because she was like I'm like, "What's up with this?" But my nervous system was jacked, right? And so I've taken I was like, "Wow," and you could feel the like, let's be honest, when you do that, like, I don't know if you could relate to this, but you feel the shame, later on, you're like, "Man, that hurt. I was off," and if you
Oh,
if
definitely.
you could sit with it, and so the best thing I found is, like, I went to her and I've done this a couple times because I went sideways a couple times, and then I was like, "Man," and I went to her, I go, when I did that, man, I am so sorry. That's just not the way somebody should be." And she looked at me like, "Okay." But the really interesting thing about that, and when you were sharing that, it came to me, is she went sideways on me. Now she's like 17. You get 17-year-old girl, like hormonal and all that good stuff, jacked up. So she went nuts, and I go, "What is up with you?" She just totally went sideways. So, like, 2 hours later, she sends me a message. She goes, "I'm really sorry about that." And she goes, "You were right." And I was like and I didn't need to be right there, but what that showed me was that I demonstrated that for her, and that she learned that. Like, you could be we're not perfect. None of us are. And it's such a cool experience. And I said that to her. I said, "You made my day, like, that you're, like," and then she goes, "Hey, can we go and get this cool dessert thing?" She had probably a secondary motive. But, like I commended her for that. I said, me at her age, I would have never done anything like that, but I didn't have a role
Yeah.
model either, so.
Yeah, that like I'm sitting here listening to you thinking, yeah, that's exactly what happens in my house now too. I've obviously modeled that to the kids, and now, I've got a 17-year-old son. The other one's 13. So, I've got two teenage boys in the house. Things can go sideways sometimes because there's all that testosterone flying around.
Mm,
And afterwards, especially the older one, he'll come to me and he'll say, "Mom, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have done that." And he can be accountable and apologize. And yeah, like you said, they've had that modeled to them. So it's become kind of part of their normal. And I didn't have that modeled to me when I was growing up, that's for sure. Um, and I'm not saying that I'm some kind of amazing parent. I'm not. I've learned all this the hard way. Um, but I think when you can model something to someone, it does start to seep in. It's that ripple effect. I think that's what I'm trying to say. You know, by you owning your stuff and working through it, it does start to have a ripple effect out into those around you and like even further.
yeah. And let's transcribe this or translate this to our work, our profession, right? Like we need to, like, each one of us can make a difference. We can make a difference to the nurse next to us. And with the work that I've done on myself and with other people, I was doing if I could share a story, uh,
Please do.
about this was, I was doing some hospice work because of my brain tumor. I just felt like I was connecting with people that were dying, right? Like, I looked down the barrel of a shotgun. I've looked at my own mortality. It was an amazing, interesting, crazy, scary experience all at once. But, you know, I, one of the things that happened to me was, it was a really incidental finding around COVID time. And I'm going to kind of tell a little bit of a long story, but it's going to lead to how it translated to me in nursing too. Is so I I I thought, we had to wear these masks all the time, and my vision went, like, blurry for like 5 minutes. And I had a business. We were doing a business of care management, and I was like, "Oh my god, like, is something going on here?" And so, of course, it goes away. I leave the patient's house and I call my girlfriend. I go, "I just kind of my vision." She goes, "You should call the doctor." And, I dust it off. "Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah, whatever." So, make a long story short, I wind up calling the doctor. The MA says, you know, um, he wants to see you tomorrow, but call your eye doctor. I said, "Okay, fair enough." The eye doctor says, "Oh, yeah, ocular migraine." And so I see the doctor and he goes, "Well, because of insurance, we probably have to do a carotid ultrasound. But if anything is weird or goes on, go to the emergency room." So I was training. I used to do a lot of mixed martial arts. So they call it Krav Maga, which is Israeli fighting. So I was tuning up for an event, and I told my buddy this story. He's a chiropractor. He goes, "Dude, are you a moron? You should have went to the hospital with the eye thing." And he goes, "I'm not cracking your neck." So I go for a run. I run a little bit, and I come home. I take a shower, about to get in a meeting on Zoom, and my hand just is like, it's like not communicating well. It's like, hmm. So I said, I'm just going to go to this local hospital down the street, like about 20 minutes away. So I drive down there. They do a typical stroke workup because I'm 49 at the time. 48, 49. And I'll never forget this. They put me through the scanner. I come back, the MRI machine, and they go, you're not crazy. You got a marble-sized tumor in your head.
Gosh.
So a doctor had sat down next to me, and the nurse was there in the ER. I stand up and I go, with an expletive for sure. I go, this effing sucks. And there's like tears rolling down a little bit. And I go, and you know what they said to me? And I was in their shoes 100 times, thousands. They had like, I'm so sorry. And I felt like, I'm sorry, like somebody is dying, like I was dead already, like this is it.
Mm.
And I didn't have any misgivings to them. Like I was them 100 times, thousands. How many times you see like, I'm so sorry because you don't know what to say, right? So
Yeah.
I have a blog, like this thing on my website about the story around that. And so now I'm very mindful when somebody goes through stuff or is going through a hard time or this. I don't say I'm sorry. I just sit there and I go, this is hard. Give them space. And I said, but we could do hard things, right? And that's been the mantra, like that kind of helped shift, like this is hard. Like we do hard. And nobody says life is easy. So let's do hard together. And back to nursing, I started to do hospice and I never did it before, right? And my nervous system started to get triggered. I was about to go into this person who's dying and management and all this stuff. And so I had this amazing nurse preceptor. To this day, she's just there. She's just amazing. Just a wonderful human being. Nurse, right? You know,
Mm.
and she saw, I'm like, hey, I'm a little nervous. She goes, Todd, she goes, it's all right. We got this. And I'm here. And I think that's what we need to do for each other is at certain times where we need it and sometimes we're the person that's that preceptor that says, I got this with you and I'm here.
Yeah. That was a very powerful story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
And I think I'm sitting kind of processing what you were telling me. Um, and yeah, we can do hard things together. I think we need to remember as nurses that we are human fundamentally, and we all experience the same human emotions. And I think when you are faced with the situation that you become the patient rather than the nurse, it does fundamentally shift the way you turn up at work. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that. And I think when you could embrace that in yourself, and you could start to not hide it and start to embrace, the human part of you and 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 put yourself like, for example, with that hard thing, with me going through that, and not to say the triggers don't come up and I might react where I need to apologize, like we talked about, like, holy crap, like my nervous system was so fired up, right? And at the end of the day, if we could, there was this nurse. We shared a similar caseload, and she's so cool. Like, and if I didn't go through that experience that I shared with you, and if I didn't embrace this inner stuff that I teach, it would have been a huge different conversation. We were both very new, and she was teaching me how to pronounce somebody, and this was in hospice, and it's very tough stuff. Like, and like very interesting. So she was teaching me what to do. She goes, "We're going to do this together," and So we went and did it, right? This guy that passed was huge. He was a big guy. Like in hospice, if you're doing home hospice, you're there by yourself. You don't want the family like doing anything to their loved one, like you turning it like that's not cool. So you're supposed to do it by yourself. Thank God we were together. We did it together. So she
Mm.
was all fired up inside. So we get out and we were going to teach. She goes, let's grab a cup of coffee. And she goes, I'm having a panic attack. I go, you are? She goes, Todd, that was a lot. I said, yeah, yeah, for sure. And he said, it's all right. So let's just chill with it, and let's just sit with this. What's coming up for you? She goes, I'm just like. I said, all right, well, I'm here, and we'll be all right. And she just breathed into it. We had coffee, let her talk about it, and it kind of settled out. But my old wounded, broken, I call it my broken nurse self, my like it's me traumatized I would have been like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? I would have talked to all of my other nurse colleagues like so and so couldn't whatever. It's all this nonsense. But we were just close. And it was just like, at least, she's awesome and we're all here and we're just part of the team and we're just trying to help each other and help the patients.
Yeah. That's beautiful that you just gave her that space to just allow her nervous system to regulate itself. Because in those moments of distress, fundamentally, that's all that we need is that connection to another and to feel witnessed by someone else.
Exactly, and I think the thing that I'm learning, and it's coming to me now more as we're talking about it, is if we can't honor this in ourselves, it's hard for us to do it with others. 'Cause
Yeah.
if you're trying to eradicate it, if you're trying to, like, fix it, then you're trying to fix it in them too, and that doesn't help them, nor does it help you.
Yeah, that's so powerful, Todd, that we end up trying to fix what's not sitting right inside ourselves. We try and fix it in other people. Is that what you're if I
Yeah.
picked that up right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, because your nervous system, it's triggering something in you, and if you can't settle it with yourself, then you're trying when somebody's experiencing it for themselves, you're trying to do the same thing to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely resonate with that. I think my, to use your term, broken nurse self would probably have done that in the past. I maybe still do it occasionally as well.
Sure.
Um, yeah, we're all human.
Yeah.
But I think going back to where we started with this, I think recognizing what does trigger our nervous system is very, very powerful.
Yeah, and just allowing that and exploring it with curiosity is
Yeah.
is really is really the place for that to start to shine, is like we take it seriously. Like, let me figure out why. Let me figure that we're going down these rabbit holes with intensity rather
I
than,
think,
playing with it in a playground of curiosity.
yeah, curiosity is such a powerful concept.
It is.
And I think when you get curious, it takes away a lot of the sting around the shame that you can go into if you don't go in with that curious mindset. It, when we start exploring these parts of ourselves, I think curiosity is the key that you've got to keep in mind so that you don't open Pandora's box and just fill yourself with shame and guilt and anything else that could come up and then just go too hard, slam the box shut again. Staying curious helps us through the process.
Curious, I use a combination of curiosity and the ability for us to learn. Like,
Yeah.
I think we don't say, "Hey," like, especially if you're a little older, you're like, this fixed there was talk. Carol Dweck wrote a book on the fixed mindset versus, and when you're in this fixed space, like, I could learn new things now. Like, I think our minds sometimes keep us trapped.
Yeah. And we've got where we are. What I'm trying to say? We've always been doing the best we can with what we know. And I think you need to keep that in your mind as well, because, you know, we're all doing the best we can with what we know.
And I agree, and it's like, I was somebody I was coaching, and they had somebody they worked with in leadership that was very toxic. And a lot of nurses could relate to a lot of toxic management and toxic leaders and just toxicity in general. And we did some deep work, and I said, when this person started to see in themselves their own challenges, right? I said, imagine what that person's like. I wonder what their home life is like. Maybe they're going through a divorce, or maybe they have a really bad marriage, or maybe their kid's sick, like that would warrant them to behave at this point in this way. And what would it be like for you to embrace your own discomfort in yourself and be like, instead of being irritated, just ask curious questions and say, "Hey, can you tell me a little bit more about that?" Can and help them, give them the space to lower those the resistance. I call it the resistance. I teach this. Like, I've done a master class on this. It's so powerful because I don't think we spend enough time learning how to deeply connect with people.
Wow. That's so true. It is. It's getting curious as to why someone is acting in the way that they are, and exploring that and seeing if there's, yeah, something more going on. Sometimes you can't do that, but, internally you can think, "Oh, wow, okay, they went a bit sideways. I wonder what's going on for them," and just hold that in the back of your mind.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, I don't call anyone's like, "Hey, you have problems at home?" No, I just say, "Hey, I'm curious as to what's your level of intensity around this. Like, you're really intense about this. I was trying to bring this up. I'm curious. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?"
Yeah, because we've all, like I said, we've all got our own trauma. We take all those hits, and trauma, I think people r associate it with, like, massive, big things that have happened, but trauma can be micro traumas as well, and they all accumulate, and it doesn't have to be something massive. Like, nursing in itself can be quite traumatic with what we're witnessing,
Yeah.
on a daily basis and being exposed to.
I think it's good to honor it and understand it, but not be a victim. Like, it
Mhm.
could be very easy now that we're giving all these labels and names to things, which short circuit the actual experience of it. It short changes it. When you bring words to it, you don't have to feel it. You could just give it a label. Like, I'm going a little deep on this, Elena.
Mhm.
You know, like
Go for it.
like sometimes you put words to it and it just gives it a name, but it doesn't have you embody what it really is. And so oftentimes one of the things, and I say this openly and people could be pissed at me, and I write about it, is I have to put it very eloquently, is that it's very easy for nurses to be a victim. And, like, instead of life is happening for you, like, that's what we should be doing. Like, life is unfolding for us. Like, life is happening to me, which is the victim. Like, nursing is like, we're oppressed, we're traumatized, we're still a victim. We have a choice. Like, traumas happen. Like, okay. Like, listen, we've there was wars before us. There were, we were just joking about William Wallace. Like these guys got killed like people got murdered. Like talk about trauma. Like in the, like in the ancient times, they were like at each other. We're fairly safe these days in a lot of different spaces, right? And and like how can we still function and be more of a stepping into our life and honoring the trauma? I'm not saying like that, like, hey, this is it, but not be consumed by it. Like, hey, I'm burned out. Like, I'm this label. Like, I've experienced burnout, but I'm learning to jump back in the game and nurture my soul. And I'm learning strategies. Or my heart is, this has caused me to like step into a new chapter of my life, right? Like, what can we walk into rather than be a victim of?
Yeah, I think that's very empowering. It's that reframe around what is this trying to show me or teach me, or where is it leading me to? We can all get stuck sometimes in our own heads and think everything's against us, but it's important to, like you said, it's feeling it, it's honoring it, but don't get stuck in that spot. Get curious. Get yourself um, some professional help, a coach, a therapist, and really start to unpack why you're feeling like you are and get back some kind of sense of control, some agency, and look at how you've got to where you are and what it's trying to tell you and where it's trying to lead you.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I am I resonate with what you're saying, definitely, because I think we can all get stuck in our own heads, and I don't know about you, but if I could just circle back to, I wanted to go back and acknowledge the story you were telling us about your brain tumor experience and facing that mortality. I've had my own experiences like that. Not the same, but I've had brushes with my mortality as well. I mean, I I have a condition called mast cell activation syndrome. So I have anaphylaxis and it can happen very randomly. So I too have had those brushes with my mortality when I've been in the resus bay. And I think that has shaped the way I now view the world and given me a really kind of, oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe curious, but it's definitely changed my approach to life. Would you say that something similar happened to you?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like there was a moment, like there's a few moments, right? Like I had the brain tumor and I had to have brain surgery, which you're like,
Mm,
man, let me just get through this with my brain intact and moving all my extremities and that in of itself. And then dealing with on the back end, I took it in two steps, um and then the back end is like, what is it? Like glioblastoma, the survival rate isn't that high. And I don't have a glioblastoma, God bless. But, I don't have the best tumor and I don't have the worst tumor. I have a middle of the road tumor, right? If
mm.
there's, if
Yeah.
there's, if there's a gauge of tumors, right? But like when I think about it, like I sat with this space, like, I wasn't getting operated on like my arm or my leg or my heart or whatever, right? I was getting like on the CPU of my body. Like that was a strange experience to just embody. But the interesting component to that was like it forced me to look at like I might not be here in 2 weeks. Like and so what that meant is what was really important. And it's so amazing that the things that you spend so much time worrying and focusing on, like a good 70, 80, maybe even 90% of it doesn't really even matter.
Yeah.
It
Yeah,
doesn't
that is
matter.
so true.
And nobody that's never brushed with it personally can relate. Like, like I have a friend who was he was on my podcast, and he's a real thought leader in brain tumor stuff. And I haven't been as engaged in the brain tumor world as I used to be. But he goes, I wish people could have a virtual reality where they have some sort of thing so they could really go there in their mind, because it really teaches you something that unless you look at it, like, because I've had friends say, well, you get hit by a car tomorrow. I said, you can, but you're not thinking that you're going to get hit by a car tomorrow. If you knew you were going to get hit by a car tomorrow, what would you do today?
Yeah.
Like like, if you knew, like, I had a patient, no joke, and she wasn't even on hospice yet. They said that she's got, like, a month to live, and lo and behold, she died in a month. And, like, I sat with her, and I was like, "Talk to me." Like, this is where I was like, "This is hard."
Mm.
Like, if you knew you weren't gonna be around on this planet in the next month, like, what would you do? What mattered?
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's so powerful. It's like, what does matter? And I think that's something that I've taken out of it all too. And even recently, like, I'm just gonna I'll have a bit of a share as well here. I had to have just 3 weeks ago actually, I had to have surgery because I had tumors on two of my parathyroid glands. And having the mast cell, I am very high risk for an anesthetic. So even, as recently as 3 weeks ago, I had that brush again with my mortality. And the night before my surgery, like, I knew the anaesthetist that was going to be anesthetizing me. I completely trusted him. I knew he knew my whole medical history. He was going to do everything he could. And obviously, I'm fine. I'm here. But that night before, I I was a mess because I thought this could be my last night on earth. What happens if I don't wake up from that anesthetic? Because there was a real risk with my mast cells that I would go into like an anaphylaxis on the table. And obviously, I've dealt with it before, but this is the first time I've had to have surgery since I got diagnosed. And being a nurse, and especially a peri-op nurse, I know far too much, and I know what happens when there's anaphylaxis on the table because I've witnessed it myself throughout my career. And my brain went to those really dark places. But I woke up in recovery. I'm so grateful that I got through it and that it went well and that everything's worked out for the best. But that real kind of when you're facing that kind of mortality, and like you said, you know that potentially the game's over. It really does shift your mindset, I think.
It does. It does. Like, my stepdaughter, like, me and her were so close. Like, all these videos come up, like, her TikTok, and she was a young girl. I was like her, like, play toy. We'd sing together and do all this stuff. And I remember she was 5 years ago. She was in middle school, and there was COVID. So I was in a different place. I lived 10 minutes away, and I had to protect myself because it was like in the they didn't come out with anything, and we were still locked down, and I'm dealing with a brain tumor. And I was on a FaceTime with her, and I just told her, like, she means so much to me, and I have a son who's older, and I said, "I hope I did right by you," and you just have those conversations. And I think that the coolest thing, like, I was blessed because I live on a lake, and I just burned fires in my backyard and before my surgery and just sat around. People came to visit me. And you know what was cool, and I still do this now, is, like, people come by and I'm like, "Hey, remember when we did that? Wasn't that the coolest thing we ever did?" Like, and I was just talking to people about just the fun, cool stuff that occurred in our lives. And to this day, and I don't know if it's since like, I reflect on that. Like, I'm like, "Hey, I remember riding my bike as a kid, and it was the coolest, awesome thing." And I don't know if it's because 'cause I'm getting older or because I had a brush with death. Just whatever. That's the stuff, that's the cool things of life, right?
Yeah, it's the small moments of joy that we have to embrace and remember. And yeah, sometimes it's making light of dark situations as well. I think nurses are very good at doing that.
Yeah.
It's almost like a coping mechanism. But yeah, I don't know about you, but I like to practice gratitude. And I think it just reiterates the power of those small moments. I used to, when I first started coaching, I used to say, one of the things that I was very grateful for was my youngest son. Um, he used to come running out of school at the end of the day and give me the biggest hug, he had the biggest smile on his face. He was so happy to see me. And it was something that I was very aware of and very grateful of at the time, because I used to say, one day he won't do that. Well, now he's in high school. He definitely doesn't do that. But at that time, I appreciated it, and I was so grateful every single day when I went to pick him up and he came running to me and gave me that big hug, because it was such a special moment of connection. And it's something that I'll always remember.
And that's the stuff that matters, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'll land the plane on this, is 2 things, is it's this spiritual connection. We talked about it to that we started this, like, there's, like, do you have a connection to God? Like, to whoever you believe, like, this connection. And all of this is, we're all interconnected. And
Yeah.
and the one thing, that when I do some deep coaching work with people to help them wherever shows up in their life, like, "Hey, I wanna have a better career, I wanna be an entrepreneur, I want this," and the reasons that get in the way are all these fanciful stories that we play in our mind. But at the end of the day, when you start to learn and to tap into more of who you are, and the world opens up in ways that people don't understand because they've exiled so many parts of themselves.
Oh, that is so powerful. And that is a podcast in itself, going down that rabbit hole, Todd.
We'll see if
But
your listeners resonate, and I'll come back for a part 2 on that for sure.
yeah, I would love that, because yeah, those abandoned parts of ourselves is yeah, it's very powerful stuff when you can start calling them back. But yeah, like you said, it's time to land the plane with this, because we've been going for an hour. But I could keep going. This has been the most awesome conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me, Todd.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure, and anything I could do to help you and your audience and nurses and people and human beings, man, that's what we're here for.
And thank you for sharing so honestly your own experience, your own story. I really appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on the pod, and I will share the link to your website um, in the show notes.
Yeah, yeah, it's toddangelucci.com. It's gonna be a new launch in the next few days, which with some new programs and some cool things that stay tuned. So I'm super excited. And I appreciate and I'm honored to be on your podcast for sure.
Thank you so much, Todd.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Happy Nurse podcast. If you've enjoyed today's content and would like to join the Happy Nurse community, head over to Facebook and check out the Happy Nurse AU Facebook page and request to join the Happy Nurse community. Also, check out happynurse.com.au for access to free downloads and subscription to my blog. See you soon, and in the meantime, remember to always offer yourself the same compassion that you so freely give to others.